Okay? That's just what I do. I talk about box office, but I also talk about movies too. All right, so first off, I got to give a huge shout out to the guys over on Film Threat. Film Threat has been rocking it recently, and it's really, I love watching their live streams, especially like after the fact, because when they get into their reviews, they're always talking about movies that either I've only, partially heard of, or films that I've never heard of at all. In the case of two of these movies are films I never would have heard of unless I had heard it from them on their stream. This one I did, right? Because as I mentioned, Vivek Ramaswamy is one of the executive producers on this movie, and that is definitely, this is definitely going to have an impact on how people potentially view the film. But City of Dreams, this film, as you can see, gave a 7 out of 10, 70 out of 100, 7% rad score too. And as I've done on previous reviews, I might maybe later on cut this up, make it a dedicated review on the channel, because I know a lot of people have been really wanting reviews on the channel. It's just sometimes very hard for me to find, one, the time to do it, but then also the motivation as well, because I've actually been really enjoying writing reviews and posting them over on Criticalist. So shouting out to the Criticalist community once again. So here are my general thoughts on the film from my review. Just getting back from the theater after another movie recommended by the guys over at Film Threat. I will say that this is probably my least favorite of the three that I have been recommended to me, but I definitely think this movie is an important one to see. Starting off with the good, I must say that there are many shots in the film that are very well framed and thought out. Though there is a shaky cam sequence that goes on way too long, most of the film is visually nice to look at. Other than that, the only thing I can say about this movie is the story it tells, as far as the only good thing is concerned. From the beginning, it states that the story is about the modern slave trade that exists within the United States, and the film intends to tell their story. Though the film is not based on any particular story, as is for instance Sound of Freedom, it was still clear that the screenplay is inspired by the various accounts of those who have been able to escape from this evil, the evil of slavery that still persists today. For this reason alone, the film is worth seeing and supporting to get the message out there even further. And I still hold by these thoughts, right? So I obviously just wrote these last night, and this, I start off in this case saying, okay, what are some of the good things I could say, right? There's the completely good, there's no mixed thoughts about it. The story, right? The general story and the general concept is great. And it's because of how important it is, right? It's trying to expose the fact that we live in a country where oftentimes we get complacent. Oftentimes we think everything is hunky-dory, when the reality is that it's not just a problem of the border. It's not just a problem of inflation. It's not just a problem of all of these things that are real, that we need to worry about, that we need to have concern about. But we literally have people working in our country who are being treated and are modern slaves. And we have more slaves today. I know this has been talked about before by different politicians, but it is true. More slaves today than we've ever had in the entire history of the world. And that should, I think, bring cause, and it should bring pause and bring concern to anyone who has a heart, to anyone who has a brain. And so I think the best thing that this film does is ultimately the fact that it's going to tell this story. Part of it that hurts it a little bit is it's not inspired by a direct true story. So the character of Jesus in this film is not based off of an actual child who escaped. It's rather inspired by either his story or the story of many others who have been a part of this. And so I think that is something that makes it where it's impactful, because it has some inspiration, but it's also not as impactful as, say, A Sound of Freedom was, where there were actual real people and real names and real accounts. And in fact, my biggest issue with Sound of Freedom was the fact that the end of the movie is made up. The end of the movie is something they tagged on, and that actually really bothered me, because with the runtime of that film, it was not needed, and they could have made it much more dramatic if that was what they were going for, with what was already confirmed to be real and true, instead of doing the stuff that they ended up doing in that movie. But in that way, I digress. The other thing I liked was, at times, the cinematography was very well done. It was very well shot. The framing was on point, and it was able to help convey the depth of this story and the severity of this story as well. You need to have a good cinematographer to be able to not only to bring about a good visual style, but also that visual storytelling. Because storytelling is not just about the words being said. It's not just about the story of what's going on. It's also about, how do you actually show that? How does the audience actually see and receive that? That's also where a huge part of storytelling is, and unfortunately today has been often a lost art. With that being said, though, there are still a lot of technical objective problems. The biggest, as far as cinematography is concerned, is the fact that there is a huge sequence that goes on for way too long, where there is a chase, and the entire chase is done handheld shaky cam. And after the first few minutes, you think, okay, this is already a bit too much, but I see what they're trying to do here. By the time you get to about minute 10, I think it ends up being about a 10-minute chase scene, you think, okay, this is getting ridiculous now. Please stop. And it's not often that I feel that way about a movie, but in this case, it was that bad as far as the shaky cam was concerned. You add on top of that the fact that the film had also very poor edits. So during this chase sequence, there's times where the character is on screen and then jumps into a different location, and you can see that there's a cut there. There's a time where the guy runs into the camera, and you can see they did that to try to add a seamless transition to another location, and sure enough, nope, you can see the edit there too. So that is, I think, another thing to mention. Again, cinematography is good for the most part, but there are a couple of times, especially that chase sequence, where it's not good. The editing also, I think, is not very well done either. It also impacts the pacing of the film. Editing is all about pacing. It's all about creating the pace that's going to have the audience go on that journey with you and have the journey with you that entire way. And unfortunately, this movie has a couple times where, especially with it being probably a little bit longer than it needed to be, drags you on a bit too long and is ultimately leading you to lose a bit of interest in the story. It has moments where it fades to black when you think, okay, why is it fading to black here? Why is it fading as if this is the end of the story or the end of part of the story without having any other clear line of delineation between those two parts? So yes, I think that these are issues. The other major problem, I think, is the acting. Because though the character, right, of Jesus, played by a very young actor, I think Ari Lopez plays the young actor, I think, who plays the male lead. I think that because his character really doesn't talk a whole lot in the movie, all you have are his facial reactions to things. Sometimes they're very good. Sometimes they are clearly, well performed and the direction is there. But there's other times where you feel like the character himself does not know what to do because the actor doesn't really know what to do and doesn't know what he's doing. That comes to me like somebody who is a very green actor. I think I tried to look at the IMDb profile of this guy, and I think this is the first major film that he has done. And you can always tell that in a lot of these things, right? When someone is brand new to acting, or at the very least brand new to the big screen. And I think that also impacts your viewing experience of the film too, because it makes it a little bit less believable. Now, don't get me wrong. There's some moments in this movie that the guy is able to give it. He's able to bring that to the story. But that is the lead role, and that means it has to be on point the entire time. And I think they would have been better served had they tried to find someone who had a little bit more experience on screen before they went that route. Also, you have the supporting cast that, again, sometimes there are some good performances, but then there's also a couple that are really, really, really bad, okay? There's some performances in this movie that are bad. So the female police officer in this movie, even the male police officer, to be honest, do not come across as real people. And in fact, the female police officer comes across as such a bad actress that when she starts to scream at the end, there's an arrest going on, she starts screaming, and immediately I was like, oh, please stop. Oh, please stop. I don't believe in you for a second. This is so clearly you acting right now, and it's very uncomfortable. That's how bad it ultimately ended up being. So you got this stuff going on. And there's also, throughout the movie, these dream sequences also. This kind of goes back into cinematography and editing, but also direction. Because the whole point of it was to try to show, all right, people want and dream of doing great things. There are people from other countries who want to have the opportunity to come to America because they want to be able to fulfill that American dream, whatever that dream might ultimately end up being. And so the way they try to show that is by having the character of Jesus have these moments of dreaming. What it would be like to be a professional soccer player, right? What it would be like to be a professional football player, playing for a team, not just in the United States, but just playing on the world stage. And unfortunately, the scenes are so clearly green screen, are so clearly CG impacted in various ways, where it just seems so fake and artificial, and it does not work, right? You would think a dream sequence might be able to get away with that, but the way that it was shot, the way that it was put together, it just did not look real. It just did not look authentic, and that ultimately makes the moment not feel authentic either. So even though I did give it a 70% rad score, I think that objectively speaking, this film is a decent at best movie, right? So kind of a middle of the road type film, but because of its message and the ending, I think also, right? There's this, after the end of the film, the lead actor who plays Jesus comes onto the screen, and it's a call to action. And one of the things that they do is they say the politicians all agree on this problem. And then there are small, very, very small, we're talking about just a couple of words from people like Barack Obama, but also like Donald Trump. Also like, oh man, what is his name? He's a senator from Missouri, right? So you have people from the left and the right speaking about this. And again, literally, it's just like a couple of lines. It's so that it could then come back to the actor who says, even our politicians agree on this point, and yet there's still so much that we could actually do to try to help people that are in this modern form of slavery. So I think that that was actually done very well, and I have to give them credit because they could have very easily fallen into that political track, but they did not. So ultimately, yes, this film is a very important film for the message that it has, but as far as a movie, I think Sound of Freedom was a better made movie, and I think that this one has a lot of things going on for it, but also has a lot of missteps. But because its message is as important as it still does get a 7% rad score from me. So those are my thoughts on City of Dreams. Now for a huge special shout out to all of my Chosen of Valhalla members, starting off first with my people on Patreon, Father Luca Illick and Miss Martin Muses. Check out her YouTube channel by the same name, Miss Martin Muses. Also to my Subscribestar people, Matt317. Check out his Twitch channel by the same name, Matt317. And also to the K-Man. Check out his website, xtheboundaries.co. And lastly to my YouTube member, Mr. Roy. Shout out to you, good sir. And if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, check out the top link in the video description below where you get access to that. Also, you get access to a plethora of other things. You get your name listed at the end of every live stream and video, like you saw in those names that came up before this video started. And also access to a giveaways channel that I host over on the Discord server where I give away 4Ks, Steelbooks, Blu-rays, all kinds of stuff. So check that out if you're interested in that. Also, I have an exclusive podcast that I hold at least once a month, and it's always a good time, and you get extra bonus content with that also. So if any of that sounds interesting, again, check out that top link in the video description below. You guys are all amazing, and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day, a blessed August, and as always, God bless.